Kevin Owens attacks Sami Zayn, but is that a WrestleMania match? And an early look at the Elimination Chamber matches and how those can affect WrestleMania. It's time to roar around the ring. And let's start with the way Monday Night Raw came to an end. Kevin Owens assaulting Sami Zayn, laying him out with the same pile driver that we saw him take Randy Orton out with, and Cody Rhodes stretchered out was Sami Zayn on Raw. I mean, Kevin Owens looking absolutely beat up, brutalized in his face. I mean, it added to the moment, the hype of the moment, the intensity of this character after what happened to him in the ladder match with Cody Rhodes at the Royal Rumble. And look, there's absolutely nothing to hate about another Kevin Owens Sami Zayn match. We know about their relationship. We know how close they are. And we know these two never miss. Every match they've had, even though they repeat it every few years, you never get sick of it. So there's no way to be upset about these two having a match. Kevin Owens, it adds to his heel character in terms of the story he's telling, the deranged, sometimes hypocritical, crazy heel character. After he told Sami Zayn they were good before the Rumble, and now here we are after KO taking him out. And look, it's a very similar thing to what we saw with Drew McIntyre last year and why that heel character works so well. Because a lot of what Kevin Owens says makes a lot of sense. We heard the explanation on SmackDown in terms of Sami Zayn being out there and not helping Kevin Owens when he was getting beat down. He just watched what Cody Rhodes did to him. But then later that same night, Royal Rumble match, every man for himself, and he's rescuing Roman Reigns from getting eliminated. So Kevin Owens makes a lot of valid points, and that's the same thing we were saying about Drew McIntyre last year and his feud with CM Punk, and that's what makes this character so interesting. And of course, we know the history between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Now, the one downside for me is that I thought a Sami Zayn heel turn could make a little bit of sense. It feels as if Sami Zayn needs a little bit of a refresher. I've said that in the past. I thought maybe a heel turn joining with Kevin Owens, his best friend, could have been the way to go. I don't see a route to get there after what we saw on Raw, but I know a lot of people are thinking, okay, maybe a WrestleMania match again between these two. Yes, it's worth it. Those two deserve it. That match always deserves it, but I think it makes a little bit more sense to push this to Elimination Chamber. Of course, in Toronto, both of them are Canadian. It makes a lot of sense. They always give them that big moment like they did in Montreal not too long ago. So Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn at Elimination Chamber, but I'm also looking at Randy Orton is yet to come back. We already have Jey Uso, who has a title match with the Rumble match. We're getting a second number one contender from the Elimination Chamber. So I don't know that we're getting Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes like a lot of people thought for WrestleMania. We may get Randy Orton, Kevin Owens for WrestleMania. And if that's the case, it makes a lot of sense to have Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn at the Elimination Chamber leading into KO and Randy Orton come WrestleMania. How about that men's Elimination Chamber match? And I think we're going to say very similar to what we said about the Royal Rumble match in terms of this lineup being maybe the greatest in Elimination Chamber history in terms of the names involved and the stories involved. And so far, John Cena has already declared himself in the match. CM Punk qualified. Drew McIntyre now on SmackDown. He qualified. And looking at what the rest of this match could look like, I would put Logan Paul in, Seth Rollins, and I would finish it out with Jacob Fatu, who's in that triple threat match with Priest and Strowman next week on SmackDown. And again, up and down, there's a lot of reasons why you can give it to all six of those guys. And it's the same thing we said in that men's Royal Rumble match. But I'm looking at Cody Rhodes. Who should face Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania? I have a hard time seeing Jey Uso choose Cody Rhodes for WrestleMania. He's not officially decided, but he did say he was already leaning toward Gunther and going after that world title. That would make more sense between those two options. So looking at a Cody Rhodes feud, yes, CM Punk would make some sense in terms of that promo we saw between the two before the Rumble. But okay, Punk, Rollins, and Reigns, that seems to be a story we could get come WrestleMania, if The Rock's involved or not. Roman's out with an injury, supposedly, but I think that is some form of triple threat or one-on-one between those three could be the WrestleMania angle they go. Logan Paul's an interesting one, and in terms of who he will face come WrestleMania. John Cena, I thought would be a good opponent, and I think a perfect way to set that up would be to have him screw John Cena in this Elimination Chamber match, because we know how serious Cena's taken this whole thing, and that would set up the perfect feud for him and Paul going in to WrestleMania. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they go with John Cena to face Cody Rhodes after everything else and how everything else is shaken out, just in terms of the old face of the place and John Cena facing the new face of the place for a huge WrestleMania title match. I mean, the story is already within there between those two. So I would not be surprised if they go that route. With Logan Paul, AJ Styles is now on Raw, and AJ and Logan Paul, it looked as if they started to tell a story in the Men's Royal Rumble match. AJ now on Raw with Logan Paul makes that easier to go WrestleMania for that. But the other option I would go, I love Jacob Fatu, but not yet, Drew McIntyre. I mean, Drew could go with LA Knight at WrestleMania to give LA Knight a big WrestleMania match, but I think the story makes more sense with Cody Rhodes and everything Drew McIntyre's heel character is about. It's everything surrounding the bloodline, which of course Cody Rhodes has been a big part of, and now he holds that title, which is what Drew McIntyre has been looking and waiting for, and of course he deserves it. There's obviously so many points you can make about why Drew deserves that spot. So come the men's Elimination Chamber match, John Cena or Drew McIntyre makes a lot of sense to get that title match for WrestleMania. How about the reception that Jey Uso got on both Raw and SmackDown? This after many people questioned the decision to have him win the men's Royal Rumble match. And look, I'll admit, I was one of them, right? But I don't hate this moment. I don't hate it for Jey. I mean, how could you not be happy for him? You saw how emotional he got on Raw. Yes, there's questions about the stories, the other names that were involved, the other stories you could have went with. The fact that we just saw Jey Uso and Gunther at Saturday night's main event. We saw them in the IC title picture as well. And for me, I don't see that match for WrestleMania. I see Jey going for the world title. I think you have find a way to get that title off of Gunther before WrestleMania. And if you don't, you find a way to get one or two more names involved in this title picture, make it a triple threat or fatal four-way. And now Jey Uso has to overcome those odds at WrestleMania to get his moment. But I do agree, Jey Uso and Gunther one-on-one at WrestleMania, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But the hate that was supposedly online for Jey Uso getting this match, clearly whoever's in the IWC and all that internet fan base and, internet wrestling fans, they don't make it out to the live shows, because once again, the overall reception on the internet does not match how the live crowd feels after all the hate and questioning and just shitting on the decision of Jey Uso winning the Rumble, and he gets the reaction he got on both Raw and SmackDown. They're going to continue to go to those decisions. We've said it with different situations. They're going to look at the live crowds. Yes, the internet's part of it, but if the live crowd's reacting in a positive way, especially to the level of Jey Uso, they're going to roll with that. It is a business. It is about money. It is about ticket sales. It is about merch sales. Yes, that's what they're all about. And Jey Uso is that guy right now, no matter what the internet wants to tell you. It's the same way as when everyone on the internet is upset when they were shoving Goldberg down our throats and Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker. Well, the reason why they were doing that is because every time The Undertaker's music hit, every time Brock Lesnar's music hit, every time Goldberg's music hit, the live crowd lost their mind. And if they're going to continue to do that and they're going to get that positive reception, guess what? They're going to keep doing it, even if the internet tells you that the wrestling fans hate it. Same situation with Jey Uso. Wrestling fans on the internet, they claimed this is a horrible decision. People are going to hate this. But then you go to the live shows, and it's another example that clearly those fans on the internet, for some reason, they're not making it to the live shows, and that's your difference maker. Looking at the women's Elimination Chamber match, and we're working with Liv Morgan, Bianca Belair, and Alexa Bliss so far qualified, and I'm focusing in on Rhea Ripley in terms of who will face her come WrestleMania. I'm looking at Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte Flair getting their match at WrestleMania, and there's not too many names on the current roster that I think make a lot of sense for Rhea Ripley in a title match come WrestleMania. I'd like to see Jordynne Grace find her way into this Elimination Chamber match and get that match at Mania with Rhea Ripley. I know that's quick, but Jordynne Grace, of course, has her star power from her days in TNA, and of course, showed up at the Royal Rumble. Great reaction, great look. She has a very similar style, physical style with Rhea Ripley. They can put on one hell of a match for WrestleMania weekend. And up and down the roster, it's either they've already had a feud with Rhea, or it doesn't make much sense. The only other name, if Jordynne Grace is not involved, that makes a little bit of sense for Rhea is Bianca Belair, but that's only if they're not going to focus in on this Bianca Jade feud and who took Jade out a few months ago. Bianca and Naomi continue to claim that they're looking for whoever took her out, but week in and week out, it's just not mentioned. So that would make sense. We've never seen Bianca and Rhea on this stage, main roster, WrestleMania. So yes, that's a big star power move, but at the same time, it would be ignoring a huge storyline with Bianca and Jade and what that could be for a WrestleMania weekend. So option A for me, Jordynne Grace. If not, Bianca Belair. And in terms of Liv Morgan and Alexa Bliss, I like those two to start a WrestleMania feud in the chamber. Maybe not one-on-one. It could be a faction war between the Judgment Day and the Wyatt Six. Yes, the Wyatt Six already moved to SmackDown, but I don't know that they care about the brand split too much. So they'll make it make sense, I guess, as they always do when it comes to the brand split. But I think that's a good route for both Liv Morgan and Alexa Bliss. I think it's a good route for both of those factions. We've already seen the flashes, the Uncle Howdy flashes during Alexa's match on SmackDown. So they're wasting no time getting that connection back. But in terms of the Elimination Chamber, I'd love to see Jordynne Grace in there. If not, maybe Bianca. And Solo Sikoa is back, returning at the end of SmackDown, targeting Cody Rhodes again. But why? Why are we doing this? Why do we feel the need to do this? It feels as if all credibility was lost with Solo Sikoa when he dropped that Ula Fala to Roman Reigns on the Raw debut on Netflix, and he's barely been seen since. I don't know that anyone's interested in another Solo Cody match going in to WrestleMania season, even if it is just an Elimination Chamber quick match to get us to WrestleMania. Now, the one question mark I have is, if we go that route, is this setting up a Rock return and somehow the Rock final boss status is going to wiggle his way into that title match with Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania through Solo Sikoa? That's a route that they could do that maybe makes this make a little more sense and maybe make it feel a little worth it. But I also feel as if Rock Roman Reigns make a little more sense for this year's WrestleMania, even though Roman potentially is tied up with Seth Rollins and CM Punk. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot they could do with it. And it's a good thing. It's a good problem to have in terms of options. But the other thing that's hurting Solo Sikoa is Jacob Fatu's popularity. Jacob Fatu is behind Solo, and especially with Solo being gone, he continues to gain that fanfare, and Jacob Fatu is looked at as everything we thought Solo Sikoa would be when everyone was begging him to turn on Roman Reigns a couple years ago. Jacob Fatu has him in the promo game, has him in ring. Jacob Fatu is a beast in the ring. Solo Sikoa, we know, struggles on the mic. He's okay in the ring. He just hasn't panned out the way people thought he would when he would break away from the bloodline. They made the most of it with the new bloodline. So if it's not a Rock angle with Solo and Cody, I don't have any interest in seeing this. And if anything, maybe a Jacob Fatu Solo Sikoa story for WrestleMania. It gives Fatu that WrestleMania stage. Yes, it gives Solo that stage. And it could be a quick way to kind of pass the guide on to Jacob Fatu and his star power for the rest of this year. Yes, it feels like a little bit of a repeat of that Roman Reigns Solo Sikoa story, but that might be the way to go, because that popularity of Jacob Fatu has hurt Solo Sikoa's credibility, especially when it comes to him being involved in Cody Rhodes' world title picture. And after Charlotte Flair won the Royal Rumble match, showing up on Raw, and this promo felt awkward, and it felt like a genuine trying to feel out the crowd. Do you like, I know she was actually saying it, but I feel like that was the point of that promo. Do you like me or do you hate me? Are you going to cheer me? Or are you going to boo me? Charlotte Flair is a heel. I think that was obvious going into that promo, which is what made it a little awkward when she tried to come out and give a genuinely emotional promo about everything she's been through over the last year, personal life, injuries, and so on, and trying to get that sympathy. And when you have that and you know it's real and you have the live crowd booing you out of the building, it's an awkward feel up and down that promo. Charlotte Flair is definitely a heel, and I think Tiffany Stratton is the obvious option here. I mentioned that earlier with the Elimination Chamber, and that point was proven in the short promo battle that they had on SmackDown. I mean, the back and forth, you felt it. Those two, and Tiffany mentioned it, very similar in style, which is why that story could be so good and that match even better come WrestleMania weekend. I'll reiterate, Tiffany Stratton needs to go over in that match, but yes, Charlotte, after that awkward promo on Raw, you are a heel, and yes, She should be that heel to put Tiffany Stratton over come WrestleMania weekend. Moving on to AEW, and what has happened to MJF? I mean, he has turned into the heel, and we saw this on Dynamite in this promo with Dustin Rhodes. And if you go back a couple years and the stories and the promo battles he had with a CM Punk and whoever else, early on in the AEW, especially his AEW World Title run, right? He has now turned into the heel that everyone accused him of being way back when. The predictable, low-hanging fruit, uninteresting heel. The regression in MJF's heel character work is real this year, ever since he's come back to AEW last summer. I mean, and you saw this, right? You have to just go after the obvious, crazy alcoholic family history thing, and it's just tired. It's not over one bit. It's overdone. And then you go, oh, he's going to mention the other company. He's going to mention Cody. He's going to mention WWE, NXT. I could have gone there. And it's over and over again. There is no progress in this MJF story. And then you look at who he's telling stories with. This is a guy who was main eventing a pay-per-view with CM Punk a couple years ago. Now he's focused in on Jeff Jarrett and Dustin Rhodes. All due respect to both of those guys, but MJF was the face of AEW. He was looked at as the top commodity in AEW, and if he ever got to WWE, how big of a star he could be. And this is not 100% his fault. This is also on the writing and how they have, moved his angles. Of course, that Adam Cole story turned into a whole blunder and what it could have been, because that's clearly just done after the Undisputed Kingdom has gotten back together. And what does that mean for Taven and Bennett? They're just gone. So they've kind of just thrown that out with the trash. And MJF, this heel character work just isn't over anymore. It's tired. It's the same thing. It's the same promo with different opponents. And fans have heard it all, and they're not interested anymore. And they're sure as hell not interested when you're telling angles with guys like Dustin Rhodes and Jeff Jarrett with a prime name like MJF, who should be in the world title picture, who should be in there with your biggest names, putting over other guys, getting put over by other guys. MJF's not that dude anymore. MJF is not the face of AEW anymore. It's not 100% his fault, but that regression and that MJF character is real, and we're seeing it week in and week out with this story with Dustin Rhodes and Jeff Jarrett. Now, one thing that did get over that I don't think fans expected to get over, Swerve Strickland and Ricochet. People actually cared about this a lot more than I think they were ready for, and I absolutely love Ricochet getting that win on Dynamite over Swerve, a great main event match in Atlanta. It felt like a big deal, and you have to give AEW a lot of credit. Ricochet was somebody in WWE that people just could not get behind as a face. They never even tried him as a heel. The promo work, yes, is still sketchy, but there's ways when you have a guy that is talented as Ricochet in the ring to get around that. And if it's not a mouthpiece, it's what you're doing with him right now, and that's making him that irritating heel. And a huge shout out to Swerve Strickland. Talk about the face of a company and what MJF used to be. Swerve is that guy right now for AEW in terms of putting other stars over. He had his shine. He was world champion, and now he is helping create new stars like a Ricochet for AEW, and that's going to help that company's success in terms of their story in the men's division. Swerve, it doesn't seem as if this story is over, and it sets it up nicely for Swerve to get one back on Ricochet without hurting Ricochet. Right early on in Ricochet's run, he would just challenge Ospreay right away. That was a dream match that we rushed into, and he would lose right away. And we saw that a lot in WWE when he would get into a story and lose and lose and lose, and that credibility got kicked down. Ricochet got a win on Swerve. It sets him up, builds him up as a star. This story can continue. Swerve can get one back without hurting Ricochet. They've handled this absolutely perfectly. They have made a new star in Ricochet as a heel, no less. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I don't think anybody thought they care about this match and care about this story and be as entertained as they have been throughout, and they delivered once again on Dynamite. Something else on Dynamite, Mark Davis joining the Don Callis family, and this makes all the sense in the world. The history with Will Ospreay, of course, teaming with Kyle Fletcher in the past. This story continues to be the best handled story in the men's division. Swerve and Ricochet is right up there. But of course, we're going to compare this to what we're seeing for the world title. And everything we're seeing with Don Callis and that whole crew with Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega, it's been handled perfectly. The one problem I had with this is Mark Davis comes out. It makes a lot of sense if you know that history, but he loses clean. No, I did not expect him to beat Will Ospreay. But when you introduce someone new into a faction, you want to make them look legitimate. You want to make them look like they add to this faction. And him going out and losing clean, it takes away all the importance of what it could have been. And again, I did not expect him to beat Will Ospreay. The easiest way around this would have been to get other people involved. He just can't take a loss. That's it. He just can't get pinned. He just can't tap out. That's it. You can have interference, you can have disqualification, and then they can do that post-match beatdown. And Mark Davis, and that addition of Mark Davis, looks that much more legitimate. But that is all taken away because before that post-match beatdown, he took a clean loss. So it's like, what are you actually bringing to this faction? What are you actually bringing to this story? That being said, I'm still a huge fan of everything around this story and how they're handling this heading into Grand Slam. Speaking of Grand Slam, Jay White laid out the challenge for the Death Riders, teaming with Cope to go against Jon Moxley and Claudio, I guess. Claudio's a trios champion, and they're going after the trios now, but they're going to do this tag match. And okay, I guess. I mean, look, this whole storyline has been critiqued time in and time out all throughout, and rightfully so. At least we have some direction, right? Cope wants a title match at Revolution. Mox is kind of doing the dance around. We're going to get that come Revolution, but at least we have some direction of where we're going with this. Cope wants that match. Christian's got a contract. Let's just focus in on that. I'm trying to ignore all the extra names that have been involved in this. Hobbs is already done with it. He's focusing in on Jericho. Darby Allin hasn't been seen. Orange Cassidy hasn't been seen. I'm not focusing in on those guys, Bryan Danielson included. We at least have some direction. Now, Jay White being involved, this is awkward with him, right? Jay White is not a guy that wants to be buddy-buddy with anybody that's not his buddies. And the fact that we saw his buddies come back, which we'll talk about, and yet he's still not even involved with them and wants to team with Cope, yes, there's a big question mark on that. But I'm trying to make the most of what we have in this Death Riders World Title storyline, and at least we have some direction. This is an okay tag match at Grand Slam in Australia to get us to that Cope Mox match come Revolution, and we'll see where we go from there. I'm still not a fan of this story. I would still not hate if Christian cashes in at Revolution to kind of move on with this title. This match, okay, but man, we got to put Jay White back with the Bullet Club Gold, because that is a crew that is legitimately top tier for AEW. And now that the Guns are back, which we're about to talk about, Jay White focusing in on that and then going after the world title, I think that's your way to go. And yes, the Guns came back, challenging the Hurt Syndicate for the tag team titles. They're still using the Bullet Club Gold gimmick, so it's not like they've lost it. They're just not around Jay White. And of course, Juice Robinson, unfortunately, out injured again. And I love this. Is there two top tier tag teams? I love how much the Guns and in that Bullet Club Gold faction has kind of grown their character to move away from being Billy's kids, right? We don't look at them that way. They're a legitimate force in the tag team division, and I love them as a good challenger for the Hurt Syndicate. One thing I don't love is, why are we rushing into this? Why are we announcing this match right away for the next week on Dynamite? There is not nearly enough going on in the tag team division to be rushing into a match like this. This is probably your top two tag teams. This tag team division is not what it was a couple years ago in AEW. So that being said, why not stretch out this story a little bit, because these are your top tag teams right now on the roster, and lead us into a match down the road. You're going to just throw this match away 1 week later. The Hurt Syndicate should not be dropping their titles right away, so the Guns don't get the win. They just came back, so now you're hurting one of them, right? You either take the titles off the Hurt Syndicate so quick, wouldn't do that, but I also don't love the Guns taking a loss or failing to get those titles after their return. Wouldn't do that either. Don't rush into this, and that's exactly what Tony Khan is doing here. That being said, I love the match. I love the Guns. I love the Hurt Syndicate. It's going to be a great match. Just build something, especially in the tag team division that is lacking right now. And before we go, we have to address WWE releases coming a little bit out of nowhere as we get into WrestleMania, and some surprises here. Cedric Alexander, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, Blair Davenport, Sonya Deville, Paul Ellering, Akam and Rezar, Isla Dawn, Giovanni Vinci, unfortunately on that list. And of course, this is, never fun to hear, but one thing I want to get away from in the wrestling world when it comes to releases is shitting on the company, shitting on whoever it may be making these decisions. Yes, there are some surprises. Sonya, of course, in her faction with Shayna Baszler and Zoe Stark, Paul Ellering, Akam and Razor with Karrion Kross. So there's some stories being told here. But first off, it's not like any of these stars were doing anything too much. And if anything, this is a good thing. We got to remember, when you give away stars like this, our instinct is to get so mad about it. But at the same time, there's so many other promotions they can go to now to rework their character, get some more star time. Again, the perfect example. Look what Cody Rhodes did with going away from WWE. Look what Drew McIntyre did. I mean, the names go on and on who went in and rebuilt themselves into a new star, whether that means they come back to WWE sometime down the road with it or they don't, and they just become a star somewhere else. Nick Nemeth is a star now that he's not Dolph Ziggler. Zack Ryder is now Matt Cardona. I mean, the comparisons can go on and on. So we don't need to be so hateful toward decisions like this, because it could be a good thing if handled well for all of these people. And in terms of their connection with WWE, keep in mind TNA is still a separate company. Yes, they have a connection with WWE, but they're still their own separate company. They're on the rise right now. I think that makes a lot of sense for TNA to hook up one of a few of these guys. And of course, some of them already have a history there, specifically the women, right? Sonya Deville, I think that women's division, could use, after losing Jordynne Grace, another top tier women's talent. So there's options out there. This is part of the business. It's a sad part of the business, but it's not always a bad thing, because a lot of these on this list, they weren't really being used anyway. So why not go somewhere where you can be used a little bit more? Also, shout out to Toni Storm, playing the role of Mariah May this week on Dynamite. I mean, those two look like they can be sisters with how well Toni Storm actually played this. That story continues to deliver leading into Grand Slam. The segment on Collision with her bringing Luther back, another example of this, the segments that we knew we would get. I don't love that Toni Storm is probably going to take a loss quickly to Mariah May after telling this story, but that doesn't make me enjoy this story any less leading into Grand Slam. And shout out to Bayley. She will be in the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game in San Francisco. It gives us a reason to actually kind of care about NBA All-Star Weekend. I just hope she can outshine The Miz in his half-court shot from a couple years ago. Raw Around the Ring is available. New episodes every week. Find us on YouTube at Raw Around the Ring. I'm Justin Valentine. We'll talk to you guys very soon.